Um, Welcome, everyone. So it's absolutely a pleasure to meet all of you virtually because I'm speaking from Italy. As you can see in the slide, I try to use a couple of geographic data type on my SQL server to analyze the distance between my city, Brescia, and Miami. So it a little bit kilometers, but anyway, I work for Microsoft. I'm a cloud architect based on data and AI, work from Microsoft Italy. And the idea of today is to talk a little bit about Azure Synapse Analytics. In particular, a couple of things really interesting in my opinion, the SQL on-demand engine and the integration with Power BI. The idea of the talk is simple. Some slides and a lot of demo to see in practice something that we can learn together using the platform. So the idea is, first of all, to understand why Azure Synapse Analytics, what is this platform, and the reason why we decide to create and release a new platform. Basically, for a single reason, to have a single place, a single service, to be able to manage all the things related to the data in a single place. So from data lake to ingestion pipeline with LT and so on, with data warehouse engine, with a serverless engine, with a Spark engine integration with all the things that, all the services that we can use outside of the platform, like Azure Machine Learning or Power BI, to create some data set to share with Azure Data Share, to be able to, sharing data set for other people, to other services, and so on. If we can take a look around the classic modern data warehouse architecture, typically we can discuss about different layers like ingestion, preparation, transformation, serving, and obviously visualization. And if we can take a look around this slide, we can see a lot of services that we already have, like Azure Data Factory, Azure Data Lake Storage, or the service that we call the Azure SQL Data Warehouse and Power BI. The idea of Synapse is to cover all the things related from ingestion to serving layer. So to be able to use a single platform to manage, transform, and use and prepare the data for all the things that we can do with it. The reason why is also simple, because typically enterprise customers, enterprises from all around the world, typically have a couple of two critical and independent systems to solve different kind of problems related to data. From one side, data science, so all the things related to data lake and exploration, fast exploration, experimentation with all kind of data, semi-structured, not structured, sometimes also structured, etc. And the other side, all the things related to data warehouse. So row and columns, so relational data, so all the things that need to have a real performance, dependable performance with structured data and so on. The idea of Synapse is to mix together all the words, both words, to have a single services to meet these challenges. This is the reason why behind the scene that have made from us the Synapse. And we can start looking some piece of cake, some services that we have inside of the platform, just to understand a little bit better what we can do. As you can see in the slide, the Synapse, it's a collection of different services. So we are able to use all of them, or just the services that we want to use to solve our problem. For example, the data integration layer is in fact the Azure Data Factory that you can use alone as a single service in Azure. But inside of Synapse, this is called data integration. So inside of this platform, you have the same features and the same functionalities that you have in Data Factory to create a pipeline, to create a complex transformation, defining data source, defining sink, so data destination, and all the things, all the transformation that we need to do with the data. Two different engines. Maybe this is the first news that we have in Synapse. The new engines are a SQL engine to be able to use relational data, structured data, and Apache Spark framework to use all the big data stuff. And the second news is the form factor that we can have inside of Synapse. Really, really amazing, in my opinion, because you have a provisioned SQL engine that is basically the data warehouse engine. So a dedicated engine for you that you are able to create your database with your tables, row columns, defining indexes, statistics, and so on. So the data warehouse. The second form factor is the OnDemand engine. And this is a really new feature. This is the first time in our platform that we can use and we can have a serverless SQL engine. And basically, the idea is to be able to use all the data that we can have inside of data lake using the SQL language, the same dialect, the T-SQL language, to query the data that are inside of the data lake. But we can discuss a little bit more about the provision and the on-demand SQL engine in a few minutes. Just to complete the introduction, related to languages inside of Synapse, you have several languages that you can use for what you need to do, using a Spark or using SQL to manage with your data. Also relating to the skills that you have in your team, and all the things related to the management of the platform, the security, the monitoring, the meta store, and all the integration that you can have with several other platform and services that you can have in Azure. First of all, Power BI, and we can see in a few minutes the integration. And one more could be Azure Purview, the new data governance platform that we have inside Azure. So a new platform that are able to help companies and customer enterprise to govern all the data that are on-prem or in Azure or in other cloud vendor or in SIS services like Office 365 and so on. Just to discuss a little bit about the SQL engine, we have a very big difference between all the other engine that we have in our SQL families, like Azure SQL, Managed Instance, or SQL Server on-prem, because all of them are single engine. And here in Purview, in Synapse, you have a data warehouse that are completely different engine, completely different architecture behind the scene. When we are talking about Azure SQL, SQL Server, Managed Instance, and so on, we are talking about SMP, symmetric multiprocessing. So you can have multiple CPUs that are used to complete process simultaneously. All the CPUs share the same hardware. I mean, the same memory, disk, network, and so on. When you're talking about the dedicated SQL pool, so the data warehouse engine inside of Synapse, we are talking about MPP, so a massively parallel processing. It is a completely new architecture, really, really different, because it's something like to have several Azure SQL all for us. You can imagine a control node, so a head of the architecture that are responsible to receive the statement coming from users tool and etc. The control node is the brain of the SQL data warehouse and is the responsible to understand what I need to do to solve the statement received. And the idea is really simple. The control node asks to the compute node in Synapse, we can have up to 60 different compute nodes that are able to produce in parallel some work to solve the statement received from the control node. Just to be clear, the architecture is really simple in this way. The user connect to the appliance, I mean to the control node of the Synapse of the data warehouse, and submit the query. Submit the statement that you want to solve, select, blah, blah. The control node analyze the statement and produce the best parallel query plan to distribute subquery to each of the compute node involved in the architecture. If we have 60 nodes, each compute node receive a query plan, a subquery, just to be able to solve a small problem related to the query received from the control node. Each compute node at this time execute the query with the data that they have, return the subset of the result of the response to the control node that create a single subset to answer the query, the statement that user have submitted to the Synapse SQL dedicated pool. To do that, it's really important from a learning point of view to understand the main difference that we can have from the old SQL family, Azure SQL, SQL Server, and so on, and the new data warehouse families. The difference is related to the way that we have to create table. We have two different new concept that need to be absolutely, we need to understand to create the best data model possible. If we can take a look of the slide, we can see a simple star schema with a fact table related to different dimension table. To solve this kind of data model, we can choose to replicate the dimensional tables, so to create the same structure in each of node inside of Synapse, and each of node have the same copy of data. So each compute node have the same copy of the data inside of each of them. So the idea of replicated is really simple to understand. The second thing is related to distributed table. And this is the main topics that we need to understand to achieve the best performance and the best design for a data model inside of Synapse. Because typically a fact table is a big table with a million rows. We need to decide how to distribute the data on each of the compute node. We can choose to to distribute the data based from an attribute, year or category or country, so on. It depends between the business problem that we need to solve. But in this way, the sales fact is physically distributed in all the nodes that we have. And this is the reason why we can achieve a lot of performance, because every compute node needs to solve a subquery with a subset of the data. So this is the reason why we can achieve a lot of performance. Maybe we can discuss more and more in the dedicated pool, but the focus of today is just to discuss a little bit more about the on-demand engine, the serverless engine. That is the completely new form factor of a SQL serverless engine inside of Synapse. And this is really useful, typically for a couple of scenarios. The first one is related to discovery, exploration, all the things related to question like what kind of data I have in my files on my data lake, how many rows. I want to understand data that I have here. And the second scenarios is related to data transformation. For example, I can receive a lot of CSV file in my data lake and I want to transform in Parquet or transform with some calculation, aggregation, etc., just to copy a new version of the data, something like from parking data to an aggregation to solve some question related to my information. So we can discuss about discovery, exploration, data transformation, but also the second one in this slide, a logical data warehouse. So we can create a relational abstraction on top of raw data. So we can create tables on top of data lake just to be able to use SQL languages to answer, to create SQL statement based on the data that we have in the data lake. So a couple of patterns that we can have. Discover. I can use my T-SQL language to create some statement, some query to the Azure Data Lake and to receive my answer, my result, using all the T-SQL features that we can have in Azure SQL or in the dedicated pool, so in the data warehouse, etc. The second one is the store some result to storage. So I can start with some raw data. I can analyze and I physically store the result of my statement for other people to continue analysis or to be able to use Power BI for reporting and etc. We can see a couple of SQL statements just to see in reality during the demo. Setup really simple. Just one thing, in the portal azure.com, we can provision Azure Synapse Analytics, and at this time, the SQL on demand is absolutely ready to use. It's up to us because behind the scene, there are batteries of Azure SQL ready to consuming statement and query that we can put to them. Just to be clear here, a technical parenthesis. In my GitHub, github.com/unbanned, you can find some repositories. This one, presentation and code samples. Inside of this repository, you can find this year, 2022, and the Azure Synapse On Demand Power BI. So here you can see all the things that we can discuss together right now. So the slides and the SQL statement for the demo. In the more presentation folder, you can find more slides with other details, because right now we have just 1 hour and we have a lot of things to discuss. Maybe we can continue in another meetup and so on. But anyway, here you can find a lot of useful information. So in this folder, you can find everything we discuss together right now. So in the portal, this is my portal, Azure. Here you can see my Synapse workspace resources. So this is the resource that I have provisioned. If I can click here, you can see some details. A couple of details are very, very useful. The first one is the workspace web URL. So this hyperlink, that is the web application that we can use in the browser to use and manage the Synapse platform. We can see in a few seconds. The other details really, really useful are related to the endpoint that we can use to connect and to use, for example, different client tool like SQL Management Studio. Maybe you love it. Maybe you prefer to use Management Studio like me. So in this way, for example, I copy in my clipboard the dedicated SQL pool endpoint. I can click here. I can open my Management Studio and I can connect to a database engine. I can paste my server name, connect, and here you can see my platform with my database inside of my dedicated pool. I can create a new query, for example, and create a stupid query like select version. This is the version that I have. Here, I already connected to my serverless endpoint. So here you can see my Benedetti Synapse OnDemand SQL Azure Synapse Net, and this is my serverless engine. And here, if you execute the same select version, you can see what I'm saying. I mean, behind the scene, we have a battery of SQL Azure ready for us to query the data that we want to use. This is interesting. A lot of things here. Okay, the endpoint. A couple of things just before the demo. The first thing is to understand the concept of external table. When we discuss about SQL serverless, we discuss about an external table because serverless don't have physical table. You can't create table, blah, blah. You just can create external table because in fact, there is no data inside of the engine because the data stay and remain on the data lake. The serverless is just logical interface to the data. So we are able to create a couple of stuff like external data source to connect to a data lake, to a folder in data lake, to create external file format to inform the engine about properties related to file. We are connecting to CSV or JSON or Parquet, etc. And you can create external table just to create a shortcut between the serverless engine and the data that are and remain on data lake. We can create with T-SQL and also with Synapse Analytics, so the web application that we can use. We can see in a few seconds. Synapse can create external table for us just with user experience. Just a security tip, really important. If you want to use the serverless engine, it's mandatory to define a storage blob data contributor role related to the people of the group that need to use the serverless engine, because the identity that I use on serverless engine is my identity, and this is the identity presented to the data lake. If the data lake don't know who I am, the security process stop my question and I'm unable to read the data inside of data lake. So the idea typically is to create a group on Azure Active Directory where we can put all the people that need to use serverless and define a role, storage blob data contributor for this group to be able to read, write, or delete things on data lake. Well, when we are created the external table, we are ready to use the data. So we can look in reality. For example, here for this first demo, I use a CSV file that you can find here in the GitHub repository of the Johns Hopkins University, as a University of Maryland, that collect data related to COVID. And I just copy a CSV file yesterday in a blob container. So here you can see in my with my Azure Storage Explorer, you can see my data lake and the CSV file, 11 megabyte, copied inside of the data lake. The idea here is to query this data to understand something, to understand something related to my data. So the idea is really simple. We need to do three different things, as the slide said to us. The first thing is to create an external file format. So all the things related to the file. So the engine could be able to understand, as you can see here, that we manage a delimited text file with a field terminator with a character. I can say to use default type, etc., etc. This is some properties that we can use to define the file format. If you can use a Parquet or JSON, we can define some properties to be more and more specific to be able to work in the best way possible with the serverless engine. So, file format. The second thing's really simple. I need to create an external data source with the name that I want to use with a location. The location is the path where the folder is. In this way, I choose my Azure Data Lake storage in my subscription, so I can create my external data source. The last thing, and maybe the most complex thing, if I don't know the structure of the file, is to create the external table with all the columns, all the attributes that I have in the file. Honestly speaking, to do that, to be able to do that, we can sometimes use the web application that are really useful to us in this scenario. And the idea is really simple. Here, you can see the workspace web URL. When you click here, you arrive in the Azure Synapse Analytics workspace. This is the web application that we can have to manage all the things related to the platform. The home, in the home page, you can see some ribbon to ingest or start exploring data or start building interactive report with Power BI and so on. You can see the recent sources used, etc. But here on the left, if you can click on data, I can see the engine that I have in my platform. As you already know, I have two different engines. You can also see the different type of icon. The embedded SQL data warehouse is the data warehouse that I have inside of the in the platform, and the serverless is the on-demand engine that you are able to use. The interesting things here, you can see you have the concept of table in data warehouse. You don't have the concept of table in serverless. We just have the external table because, as you can see, as I already said, there is not exist a physical table, physical data inside of the serverless, just external logical interface to the data lake. In linked, if I can click here, you can see my data lake, and I can make a right click preview just to see what kind of data I have inside of my file. With a right click, I choose a preview, and here you can see a preview related to the data. But the interesting thing also is that I can do a right click and create a new SQL script like select blah blah, just able to create a select to see the data, and also create external table. If I can click here, a wizard in my user interface are able to create for me the T-SQL statement that I can copy it here with the statement, with all the column name, the type, etc., data type, etc., to create a table that I want to create. So the idea here is I prefer to do manual things, not user interface things. So here I can execute this statement that are create external table, a lot of columns, a lot of attributes, and a with clause. In the with clause, you can see the location, the data source, and the data format that you already specified on top. With this information, my external table are able to, okay, just a moment, maybe there's some refresh. Maybe I lost my connection. Okay, my test COVID, right click and select. Okay. And here I am able to execute my statement related to my data. Honestly speaking, the first select could be slow because it's the ramp up of the Azure SQL behind the scene just to start querying. The second query, if I can start another way, could be more fast. Okay, 2-3 seconds. Okay, here you can see the data that are in the CSV file in my data lake, but here you can see the data like in a table because I use a table, external table, but a table. The interesting thing here is that we are able to manage the data using T-SQL just to transform the data reading for what we need to do. As you can see here, the University of Maryland decided to use some attribute to define information related to the name of the country, region, longitude, latitude, etc. But as you can see, the idea of, from the university is to add a new column, a new attribute for each day. So in fact, it's not like a table, it's more like a matrix. So if you take a look around the file tomorrow, you can find a new column related to the day, to the data of today. In this way, it's not so useful for me to use the data. So the idea here is to transform data in some way, for example, using some features, T-SQL feature, like pivot. Maybe you don't know the syntax, is not the subject of the call, but just a couple of things. In this select, I use several T-SQL features to transform a matrix in a table, just to pivot and pivot the data. I use some information like LAG to analyze the previous row to be able to create a difference between current data from the previous data and so on, but row number and so on. But the idea here, execute, is to be able to transform data in a way useful for me. So I receive data in a way, in a CSV, in a matrix structure. With T-SQL and in external table, I'm able to transform the data for what we need to do. For example, a Power BI report related to COVID data, just executing a select a script like this one. And this is really interesting because, for example, I can create a view. So I can create view here, create, view, blah, 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 and insert the statement that I want to execute every time I want to select my view. Second scenario, really useful for serverless, is to use create external table as select. So statement that are able to store the result inside of my data lake to physically have a copy of the result that I created with a SQL statement. Just to remain on the demo, I can create a new external table with the result of a particular statement. For achieve the result, I need to create also a new thing that is the database scope credential that are simple signature able to read and write data to data lake. I can create this object. Like in the previous demo, I need to create an external data source with a location, specific location with credential already created. So the token that the serverless need to use to be able to write the data on the data lake. A file format, in this way, really simple. I just define a format type parquet and a kind of data compression. Okay. And in this way, I can create an external table, okay, with some properties, the location where I want to write, the data source that serverless need to use, the type of file that I want to create. And in this external table, the idea is to write the result of the statement that are inside of the setas, create external table as select. Just to be clear, we are going to create a new folder called demo parquet at the ALS that don't exist here. Refresh. Yes, exists. So I need to delete this folder from my previous test. Okay, so in my folder, in my data lake, I just have this CSV file, refresh just this file. So I can come back here. And the idea is to create this one. Okay, at the end of the story, I'm able to see a new external table, my test set as a DLS. Am I able to select the data inside of the table? Execute. This is the result. And if I take a look around my data lake folder, refresh, this is the folder just created, double click. This is the Parquet file created with the result of my statement. Really simple. Okay. Just a note, really, really useful. If I want to clean my demo, for example, I want to clean my table just using a drop external table, I can do it. So if I refresh my external table, my table is gone, okay, it's deleted, but we need to pay attention because here the folder is not deleted. When I delete external table, I delete just the logical interface on the serverless engine. I don't touch the data lake. The file, the folder and the file still here, is already here, okay? If I need to do something like that, I need to delete in manual way, or I can define a pipeline that, for example, with a couple of steps. The first step can delete the external table. The second step can delete physically the folder inside of data lake, okay? Last things before talking about Power BI, really interesting, something related to monitoring. We have some DMV, data management view or data management function. Maybe you already know in Azure SQL, etc. We can use this kind of DMV just to select some information to understand, to monitor the serverless engine. You can see here, we can see all the query that we are running inside of the platform with some useful information like the duration, the data process, the data pricing. Why data pricing? Because the engine is a pay-per-query engine. The price depend on region. Western Europe, the cost is 4.22 euros per terabyte. It means that in a simple query like that, you can see the price that I have in this month. In April, I have used and processed this kind of megabyte. This is my monthly billing. Really cheap, really interesting, really, really useful. In the slides, you can see also other things, but you can read, you can use and see the slide also when you want. The interesting topic that I want to discuss with you is the integration with Power BI, because in the platform, you are able to manage linked services. So you are able to connect, create a shortcut with other services like Power BI, just to be able to create a report inside of Synapse. Here on the left, you can see data, develop, integrate, etc. In develop space, you have all the things related to the things that you can do on Synapse. You can create a new SQL script, new KQL script, notebook, data flow, blah, blah, blah. But here, at this moment, you can't create a Power BI report. Why? Because as a first step, we need to integrate the platform with the Power BI services. And to do that, I go in my Power BI, I create a new workspace dedicated for this demo, underscore Synapse demo, something like that. Okay, this is my name. Save. Okay, this is my Power BI subscription. Pro Premium is not important. I just create my workspace because what I want to do is to collect this workspace with Synapse to be able to create report directly in Synapse. So I come back in Synapse. I can go in Manage. I can go in Linked Services here. and I want to add a new linked service. I can click here, and here you can see a lot of services that you are able to link to be able to use, manage, etc. in Synapse. But you can see here on the top, you are also able to connect to Power BI. So I can click connect to Power BI. This is the name that I want to create, Power BI Workspace demo. This is my tenant with my subscription. I want to find my, okay. Synapse demo is the workspace that I just created in my subscription. Okay. I can create, okay, will be created when publishing. So here you can see an icon that inform me that I need to publish the linked services to be able to use it. So I can click publish all, publish, and successfully publish it. So here, my linked services, now I have a new service related. I come back in develop, and here, as you can see, I have a new folder called the Power BI, and in the plus button, I have the new item, Power BI report. So really, really simple. What I can do is just to create a new dataset, Power BI dataset, following this step. So what I can do is new Power BI dataset. I can click here. I want to create a Power BI dataset to my serverless engine. So I'm able to download my file. We can just follow the step, really, really simple. I can click here, open the file. So my Power BI desktop is turning on in my primary screen. So I just move the application in a few seconds. Okay. When Power BI desktop finish to open, just a second, they're working on it. I can't move right now. I can switch my screen maybe. It's not so fast. Okay, I need to switch my stop sharing and share my primary screen. Sorry, guys. Okay. Cecilia, can you see my primary screen?
Yes.
Okay, that's perfect. So Power BI desktop is turned on, directly connected with the serverless engine. And for example, I want to create my data model using a view, a table, all the tables that I want to use. Simple. I just to connect with this kind of view. I can load choosing the type of connection. Maybe with Power BI you can use import or direct query. I just want to use direct query. Okay. Okay. It's not so fast my connection. Sorry. Maybe my children is playing with Xbox or something like that. Okay. Well, as you can see here, you have your fields, your data model. Very simple in this demo, but it's not the problem right now. I can put some attributes, just drag and dropping the attributes when the view open the fields. is thinking? Okay, good. Just one field. It's not important the type or the kind of report that they want to use. Okay, sales. It's not so fast right now. Okay, great. So a couple of things. I just defined the sensitivity of my report, clicking here, public. Okay, and I want to publish my beautiful report. Yes, I want to save my changes, and here my synapse test. Save, working on it, and my workspace, synapse demo, and select publishing. Okay, got it. I just move, I'm sorry, in the other screen. Come back here. Okay, maybe you can see my second screen.
Yes, back to
Okay, okay, thanks. So here, I can close and refresh. I can close and refresh here in Synapse. And here I can see my data set, see test, and my report. Maybe. Okay. With the data that are coming from Synapse. I'm sorry for the performance, not so good right now, but anyway, right now we are able to create new report from my data set, modify my beautiful and complex report that I have and publish and etc. etc. So all the things that we can do with data, we are able to do in Power BI, in Synapse. Here in the slide, you have also all the details we already created, the Power BI, etc. Well, we already discussing about the pricing. Just a couple of things. Well, the cost control, we can manage a cost control inside of serverless engine just to define the limit for a month, just to be able to not spend a lot of money. But honestly speaking, it's really, really cheap. A couple of notes. There is no cache on SQL on demand, so the query, there is not a way to run faster after the first run. So the first run may be slow just to warm up the Azure SQL. There is not a way to pre-allocate more resource, but in my opinion, is a beautiful platform and services to start using in scenario like exploration, analysis to create some transformation, ready to use for Power BI, etc. Really, really interesting. We have a lot of things to do. We have running a lot. I don't know if we have some question right now, Cecilia. Maybe we have some few minutes. But first of all, thanks for your attention to be here with me. Hope to be helpful. Yep.
Amazing, amazing presentation. Thank you so much. We have a couple of questions coming. First, Suman, he's asking if you could repeat.
Yeah, I can see.
Just to integrate in Synapse with Power BI. Alex is asking if this can be configured without the graphic user interface like PowerShell.
Yeah, with PowerShell. Not right now, or well, not completely. We are working on that to be able to manage all the things also from a PowerShell perspective. So the question is not right now. I can see also the other question. Synapse Workspace, Power Workspace need to be in the same time. Not need to be, but could be best practices from avoid network latency, etc. Just from a performance point of view, could be better that to be in the same tenant. And maybe obviously also the data lake need to be in the same tenant, in the same region of the serverless engine because the performance, because the network latency, etc. So could be great from a best practice point of view to be in the same tenant. And if you use data lake, serverless, etc., to use Parquet file format that are compressed, columnar, more fast than a classic CSV, etc. There are any benchmark that have been done to show performance improvement building Power BI report using Synapse? Well, honestly speaking, it depends. If you use an import in Power BI, the import is the fast way that you have because it's in memory. So there is not a fast way that memory. If you use a direct query on serverless only in the dedicated pool, so the data warehouse, you use a storage. So obviously it could be more slow. It's possible to define open row set command directly. Yes, in the get data section, you can do it. So we are able to use open row set because you are in Power BI, you can use a SQL statement that you want. So no problem on that. Thanks, Mike, for the feedback. What the typical transformation that has to be done to flat file? But it's up to you. I mean, depend. Thank to you, Demeter. It depends for the business problem that you have. In my demo, I starting from CSV in a matrix structure and I using pivot and pivot, row number, lag function, etc. to create some calculation. It depends. The beautiful things that you can use your T-SQL features. So maybe your limit your fantasy. And maybe no more question. 7 o'clock for me.
Yes.
1 hour.
Andrea, perfect, amazing. If you have a few minutes, could you cover at least high level a little bit of pricing? Because that's always something that.
Yes, the pricing is really simple. I can use just a couple of slides here. The idea here is we have a fixed rate per terabyte for Western Europe. Honestly speaking, also for US is the same price, well, in dollar. But in Europe, we have 4.22 euros per terabyte. But the charging is related to 10 megabyte. This means that for every query that you have, for example, here, I executed this kind of query. This is the result. If I go in messages, I can find a really useful message that is this one. I'm sorry. I copy the message just to be able to see in the best way. Okay. Every query that we execute in serverless touch some data. That means that serverless scan some data, move some data, and maybe write some data. So every query touch some data. My query in this example touch 13 plus 1, 14 megabytes. Okay, this is the price that I receive. For example, if I go in my monitor statement, here I can see my last query. Okay, you can see the duration. Okay, the data process is the number of megabyte used for calculate the price. If you sum all the data processed in a month, you receive the price that you need to pay because the serverless is a paper query engine. The second query, you can find this SQL script in my GitHub, so ready to use. If I execute my script, I can see with my login in April the sum of the data process inside of my serverless engine and the monthly billing, so the price that I need to pay. Okay, it's really simple to understand the price. Okay, here I have an example. Imagine you have in a month 30 execution time. Each execution move 0.5 terabyte per execution. It means that in a month you have 30 for .5 for the price. This is the monthly cost, nothing more. Okay, could be really interesting because if you compare the data from the dedicated pool and the serverless, it's completely different. But honestly speaking, also the scenario, the use case is completely different. So it's up to us when we want to use, but for exploration, etc., could be a really an amazing idea to start using. Okay. Tips and tricks. If you use Parquet file, will be cheaper because if you select just some attributes in your select, because the Parquet file is a columnar, the serverless engine use just this attribute. If you do the same query in a CSV file, the CSV file is a flat file, so the serverless is not able to use just the attribute, but read all the rows. So you can pay more because you move more. In the slide, I also have here some information related to Parquet. We have a lot of slides, but not so much time to discuss. But in the best practice here, you can see difference between the same file in CSV on the Parquet. You can see the difference between sites, but you can see here the difference from the same statement related to duration, row touched, but here you can see the main difference. Not only the duration, but also the data used, so the price at the end of the story.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so
A little
much.
bit more clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone has any extra question? I see here it's asking if are the SQL statements show at the Microsoft VP 203 XM level? I'm not sure.
Honestly speaking, I don't know. Well, this is my demo script, not copied from our exam, etc. But I know, and I can share in this exam, you can find some question related to serverless. So my idea, as usual, is to try something before the exam to do some query, some demo to understand something, just to be able to understand a little bit better question in our certification exam.
Fantastic. Do you have the slide for your contact information or?
Well, in the first slide, there are all the information, my LinkedIn, Twitter, but for me, the great idea is to start from here. If you start from my GitHub, in my repository, you can find the slide, and so also the first slide, all the contact or LinkedIn and so on, just to continue to discuss and chatting.
Fantastic, yes, and they can download the presentation from there if they want to.
But the next meetup, I need to come in Miami. Would be a good idea.
Yes, absolutely. When you're in Miami, we can do something in person.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. No, thank you very much, Cecilia, for organizing this event. I'd really like to talk with community and so on. I was a SQL Server MVP 10 years ago, so I have community in my DNA. So really, I love it. I love it.
Do you have any upcoming talks that you?
Well, no, we have some conference in the near future, also in presence here in Italy. During the month of May, we have the Global Azure. Maybe you know, is um, uh, a global event. Maybe in each country you can find some meetup and conference, etc. So I will be able to present the keynote in Italy in presence from a lot more than 2 years. So really emotional. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, guys, do you have any questions for Andrea?
I just want to thanks all the attendees. I hope was useful the session. I hope was great your lunch. It's more like dinner time in Italy, so time for a glass of wine and a great evening for me.
We have many attendees from Italy, so
Ah,
probably
yes, amazing.
the names there. Yeah.
Okay,
All right. Okay. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you again, Andrea.
thank you, Cecilia.